Hi, just dumping this on the second channel, a bit of a follow-up to the EV blab I just did about Patreon and how, well, they're not a sustainable business. I'll link that video in if you haven't seen it. Might not make much sense otherwise. Somebody pointed out this Patreon post, and I guess I should have sought this out when I did this video, but it's just a blab. Exciting news. We've raised $60 million in the new funding. That was the last and the biggest funding round that they actually got. I still got the Crunchbase thing. Here it is, all from Thrive Capital or Index Ventures. But yeah, my bulk of the money from Thrive Capital. Why did they need, I won't pretend I know about the proper series structure of venture capital funding and all that, but seed round, series A, B, C, these are all technical terms within the venture capital industry, and they decided they wanted to take $60 million. And this is an article back in September 19th, 2017, just after they secured that funding of $60 million. And it paints an interesting portrait. So let's take a look at it. It is from Jack Conte himself, the CEO. So it's just over a year and a few months, not quite a year and a half ago, since they took this money. I've got some exciting news. Patreon has just secured an additional round of finance, $60 million, which means we'll be scaling our team, building faster and building more, or in service of getting you paid what you deserve to be paid for the value you give the world. Yay! And there's the happy, smiling crew at Patreon. There they are. Or that's what they were a year and a half ago. I'm sure most of them are still there. Right now, you and your patrons send us thousands of emails every month asking for features, functionality, and new products. I don't doubt that at all. I feel your pain so hard, and so does every team member at Patreon. We so desperately want to build a world of awesome products for you. Every bone in our bodies, blah, blah, blah. And this new round of financing brings us closer than ever to that world. So it's if, like, they couldn't add these new features unless they got $60 million. This just seems completely back to front. My whole point in the previous video was that I was stunned that it took 300. They said they had over 300 employees. That was just on LinkedIn. We don't know how many additional they have above that. It could be, 305. It could be more than that. Why does it take so many people to run what is essentially a website and a back-end processing system to do this sort of stuff? And a lot of people in the comments are saying the same thing. A lot of experienced people in the business are saying the same thing. Like, why can't you have like a couple of dozen programmers tops, a couple of dozen finance people, a couple of lawyers, or even someone said one lawyer on retainer is good enough, or something like that, and not much else. Few people to manage it. It doesn't even crack triple-digit headcount, let alone 300 people. And this is interesting. Before we go into the infrastructure, he talks about the next 2 to 5 years of what he's going to do with the money. But look down here, how he started out, which is interesting. Great story. Started out in the floor of his dad's apartment, wasn't eating pizza for breakfast as the site went live. Because Jack Conte's a fellow YouTube content producer, of course. He had been making it, blah, blah. Did anyone else feel like being undervalued? My co-founder Sam Yang had built Patreon by himself over the course of 3 months, and everything was ready for launch. I had been working on a video announcement to my fans. Blah, blah. Sam was the partner who did all this. Anyway, once he uploaded the video, within minutes, and there's a screenshot, he had $700 a month, or per video, actually it is. And look, the site doesn't look hugely different to what it is now. It was obviously functional, doing exactly what he wanted. Now, 4 years later, 50,000 creators are getting paid every month. And spend $150 million, blah, 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 30K per month, all that sort of stuff. Okay, many creators are using Patreon to grow and scale their business, hire teams, and all that sort of stuff. And there's their corporate headquarters at the time. They all look happy. Anyway, the Patreon team was 80 people. And all our souls are flying to build your products, blah, blah, blah. That's great. I'm sure they were working like maniacs. Fantastic. But the thing was, they had 80 people just like not less than a year and a half ago before they took this money. And does the site, I can't think of too many features that have been added in the year and less than a year and a half since they took this money. Like, I don't know, Patreon, I've been on it for quite a few years now, I think. What is it, 4 years? I don't know. But I started on, when it was relatively early, and it did what I wanted when I started. And I'm not a huge creator. I don't even rank in the top 100 or something like that. But I've got, what have I got? Here we go. What's my current number? It has been dropping since the thing, by the way, overview. I've got 1,456 patrons currently, $38.79 per month. So a reasonable size creator on Patreon, and it did everything that I wanted. Really, there was some live video integration which they added, which I loved at the time, and then they dropped it, and then they had to re-enable it especially for me. Actually, I did contact Patreon once to talk about that, and they added it back in. Anyway, I haven't used it since. I just they had some service which was really nice that did live stream, and I forget the name of it. Anyway, but it still does exactly the same thing as when I started. And they talk about, where is it? Hang on. And this is where we have to go up here, right? So they were able to do this, a functional website with 80 people, or even less than that, back when Jack started. Maybe they had a dozen or 2 dozen, and it was doing pretty much what we do now. Anyway, what were they going to add? Think of this as a back office, business infrastructure, analytics for understanding your patrons, your rewards, and your income, dashboards that summarize the performance of your membership business and give you clear and helpful suggestions, rock solid and simple financials, rewards management, automation and delivery, patron management, who are my patrons, what are their Twitter handles, how much they spend on me. Well, okay, this is great, but I thought pretty much most of this stuff was there before they took that $60 million, and they only had 80 employees instead of 300. So, it may have been tweaked, and they may have, I'm sure, I don't use all the features on Patreon, so maybe they've added a few things which are helpful for other creators on Patreon, but I like to think that I'm a typical creator on Patreon. I wouldn't be too far outside the middle in bell curve of it. And I don't know. And how does this need $60 million to do this sort of stuff? Don't you just hire a couple of really smart programming nerds, pay them really well, feed them up with a lot of pizza, and they just add these features like crazy? Isn't that how, I'm not wrong, am I? Rewards to energize patrons. This is everything you need to entice and keep your patrons, because offering and filling rewards and benefits should be seamless. Segment these into 3 main categories. Creator patron intimacy. I want to be intimate with my patrons. Like interactions and patron-only polls. Okay, once again, it's just a software feature. Ongoing exclusivity, like access to a patron-only Discord server or early access to content. Okay. They have added the ability to connect with your Discord server. Okay, fair enough. Not sure how hard or whatever that was, but once again, it's just a programming thing. Actual goods, whether digital or physical, like a signed poster or an extra episode. Well, I'm not sure that I can order posters or whatever through Patreon. Is that a new feature I'm not aware of? Anyway, well, this was their goal, 15 months ago. Maybe they decided it was a bad, about 15 months ago, whether or not that was a bad idea. And they just didn't do it. Many of our other experience where you can access them, special goods and other platforms. Yep. That's the thing. What's his quick note? There it talks about the history of it. But once again, these are all just so that you put a handful of engineers on, software engineers on. Programmers. I don't understand why you need to take $60 million and increase your size from 80 to 300 people and still have the bulk of the functionality is the same to what their patrons wanted originally. It's crazy, but that's what happens when you take investor money. They want to see growth. I mean, where's my mouse pointer? I think Jack's just gone about this the wrong way. He's done the traditional venture capital route And I think it's come back to bite them. If they just took, I can understand taking like a couple of $1 million up front, hire a few programmers, feed them pizza, get the infrastructure started up. But it sounds like, what was it, Sam did all the work and had a functional platform. But anyway, I can understand taking a couple of $1 million up front. But then you should, like, then just give them part ownership, or I don't know how it works, but you shouldn't need much more than that. Maybe the second round. Okay, you take that funding, but then does that mean, can you actually stop at that point, or are you simply on the train and you've got to ride it all the way, all the way to Central Station? There's just no, all stops to Central. There's just no choice. And you've just got to follow through because the previous investors demand that you get more investment funding and more until they have an exit strategy and they cash out either via an IPO or being bought by a big cash cow company like your Facebooks or your Googlies or whatever, your Alphabetties. It's just, I don't see why they need so many people. And yes, everyone talked about the cost in San Francisco and stuff like that, and how $25 million wouldn't be able to run something like this with 300 employees. And that was my point. I was just doing some ballpark stuff that, okay, if all that 25 million just went into wages, then it's 83 grand per person or whatever. But yeah, I know everything's expensive, right, in San Francisco, but they were doing fine with 80 people. There they are. They were doing great. And they owned the market. They practically owned this market of being the middleman for creators to get in there and, offer something different to just PayPal, which didn't have all the, the tiered structure features and all the interactive stuff you can do with your patrons and things like that. So they offered a valuable service for the 5%, and all of the creators like me just jumped on board and went, yep, fantastic. And they were, going along sweet with 80 employees. And then they took the $60 million and it expanded to 300. They're probably not making a profit because I'm sure they're eating up that $25 million a year with the 300 plus employees. And I don't know. It's just nuts. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting look back when they just took that money. And if you can remember back, maybe people can go way back archive or something, have a look at what, my memory's not that great from back then in 2017, but I don't think anything's changed on Patreon. Certainly haven't changed the way I've used or anything like that. No compelling new features on there that I've gone, wow, I've got to, this is so fantastic. I'm glad they did this. So, yep, they took $60 million for it. And the only way that that those investors are going to demand their money back is if they show massive growth and have some sort of exit strategy so the investors can get their money back. And it's probably a downward spiral, unfortunately. So, yeah, it's better to stay lean and mean, and because once you take people's money, yep. Yes, you've got to ride that donkey all the way into town. Oh, well, anyway, there you go. Catch you next time.